Before we get into the intro today, I have to tell you guys about this awesome chance to save some money on the upcoming Pacific Bitcoin Festival happening on October 5th and 6th out in Los Angeles. If you click the link below in the show notes, you get a 21% discount on the event tickets. And the best part is you don't even have to worry about remembering a promo code because the link will automatically apply the discount at checkout. Guys, I have to say that honestly, this might be one of the better events to be going to this year, because not only will you be surrounded people like Lynn Alden, Greg Foss, Preston Pish, etc., but this one is actually one of those affordable events in the space that you can go to where it's not going to cost you thousands of dollars just to get a ticket like some of the other Bitcoin events. So go and click the link below, get your tickets to Pacific Bitcoin, and when you do, please reach out to me. I'd love to hang out with you guys in person. I'd love to get a real-life happy hour set up to chat and hang out with you guys more. So I hope that I can see you guys there. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's release of the Hashrate Happy Hour Podcast. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dan Lawrence, the founder and CEO of Foreman, and Jeremy Ellis, the director of power at Foreman. Not only is this conversation an absolute blast, but I am also a huge advocate for their software. I personally use it, and I can't say enough good things about how easy it is to use and how easy it makes your life when managing a fleet of Bitcoin miners. It's absolutely free up to 25 miners as well, so I highly recommend that you go check it out and give it a try. All right, enough of me drooling over their software and how good it is. On to the show. Today we talk about the really unique intersection that Foreman sits at, which is the software tool that helps manage not only the miner fleet, but also integrates into the utility company's curtailment programs. The combination of Dan and Jeremy on this episode really helps pull out all of the detail as to why miner software is so important for both managing the Bitcoin miner fleet, but also for letting the utility company start to plug into software that lets them be surgically precise in executing demand response programs. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, the Texas Blockchain Council, a Bitcoin-first nonprofit industry organization working to make Texas the jurisdiction of choice for Bitcoin mining and blockchain innovation. They will be hosting North America's premier policy conference for Bitcoin and the digital asset ecosystem on November 15th through the 17th in Fort Worth, Texas. For more information, please visit their website at texasblockchaincouncil.org. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Like I said in the introduction, I'm here with Dan Lawrence and Jeremy Ellis at Foreman. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Good to be here.
Awesome.
I'm super excited to get into this conversation today, guys. It's the reason that this one's going to be so fun is it's this unique twist of like the tech stack behind energy management, Bitcoin mining management, kind of all rolled into one. So this is going to be super fun for me. I'm a little bit out over my skis, to be honest. So you guys will have to take it easy on me as far as like the jargon, but I think this is going to be a phenomenal conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I one of the things I always like to do to kind of kick the show off is I really do like hearing people's backgrounds and what ended up leading people into this crazy world of Bitcoin mining, not even just Bitcoin or, the broader crypto, industry environment, but Bitcoin mining of all things. So maybe if you guys could both walk us through your backgrounds and then what led you to Bitcoin mining. And Dan, if you don't mind kicking it off.
Sure. I can start. I've got a short, how did I become a Bitcoiner story, and then a longer one. I'll give you somewhere in the middle.
Perfect.
But I guess you could say I'm not a fan of banks. We'll go that route. So my background. So I'm Dan. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OBM. Our product name is Foreman. Some people don't realize where OBM came from. We used to mine. This is also kind of our origin story to Foreman. So me and my co-founder Jake, it's probably late 2016, early 2017. We got into Bitcoin mining in a detached garage in Westminster, Maryland. So we're both from Baltimore. It's about an hour drive one way. It was this little detached garage with a cell internet connection because we didn't have any wired physical internet out there. It was just all ran over cell.
Oh, wow.
And it was also it was a metal frame to it. So we didn't have any reception in the garage either. So we had these antennas and we had this thing like taped to the window trying to get service through the window of this garage. And then we had these ridiculous looking magnetic antennas that we would attach on the outside of the garage trying to boost the signal. I'm sure that was a scam. I don't think it did anything. It's like one of those swap your cell phone antennas back in the day and you just instantly get better service, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it did anything. But no matter what we did, we had a hard time remotely managing things, and this is where our company name came from. We OBM is our company name. It stands for One Bar Mining, and it's because, well, back when we mined, no matter what we did, we could never get more than 1 bar of service in that garage. Even with all the ridiculous antennas, all the junk, nothing ever worked. So OBM was started, and we needed a way to remotely monitor and manage things that helped us not have to drive an hour one way to go up there, figure out what's wrong, reboot the machines, drive all the way back. So my background is software development. I've been doing software development since college. I'm 36, so I guess maybe do the math there. I don't know, it's been a while. And my co-founder, he was also a software developer. We met at our last job together. And we just felt a need to build some software so we didn't have to keep driving to reboot everything. And that's kind of how Foreman started. So now we still do the remote monitoring, management, all the automation to help manage the sites, and ideally, if you're sleeping, you're still hashing, and then if it stops hashing, some automation can run and get you back to hashing. So that's where Foreman kind of started, and it's been a crazy ride. And now here we are talking about the energy side of things. So it's been an evolving process too.
I appreciate that, Dan. Love the OBM, 1 bar mining. I love that.
Yep.
I love that. And yeah, we're going to dive into kind of the whole genesis to, where you started even with just Foreman to how we're going to dive into all the energy side. And Jeremy, I think that's a nice segue into your background and your Bitcoin mining story.
Yeah. So mine was a convoluted path to get to where I am today. This obviously wasn't what I dreamed about growing up as a little kid, working in the Bitcoin industry and things like, especially when I'm much older than Dan and I get made fun of about it on a daily basis. So I'm just still learning how to turn my computer on. So that's been a challenge all in itself. But I initially went to college to study to be a pilot, switched from that to get into broadcasting. So did some sports broadcasting for a while, and then a natural transition was into sales.
Naturally.
And back late 2005, early 2006, here in Chicago, where I live at, ComEd, the utility here, was further undergoing deregulation and bringing on, different classes of power users into the deregulated power market. So that was a hot topic, and a lot of suppliers were coming into the area here and actively recruiting. So I got hooked up with a broker actually for my initial foray into energy. Did that for a little less than a year and was recruited away by a supplier. And from there, just kind of worked my way through a couple different suppliers. Each time that I moved was trying to learn, a different market and a different grid. So it started out primarily in PJM, just in a couple states, Ohio and Illinois, and then found another supplier that worked, more towards the East Coast markets. From there, I went to another supplier that, gave me exposure to ERCOT. So was, trying to learn the ERCOT market. And then from there, so that was about 13 or 14 years just on the deregulated power side, working both direct and indirect sales. So working with a lot of partners, a lot of brokers. And then from there, decided to add another little tool to my tool belt and got in on the demand response side with a CSP, and they brought me in to work national accounts just based on my knowledge of the different power markets.
Sure.
So that worked out great, which, gave me, the foundation to learn demand response and curtailment programs and all those type of things. And basically when you're in the power industry, it's akin to baseball, right? You can hit a lot of singles or you can start like swinging for the fences. And when you start swinging for the fences, you're looking for these, huge users and huge loads. And it went from, we were doing a lot of work kind of in the data center space to where all of a sudden, hey, these Bitcoin miners are like paradigm shifts of power that they're using on the grid.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of it is they have a very flexible load and can curtail, rather quickly when called upon. And so my first kind of exposure to the Bitcoin, space and community was June of 2022. I went down to the Miners Summit down in College Station, Texas. And I remember talking to some of these miners there and explaining demand response. And the initial kind of reception was like, what do you mean we want to curtail? We're miners. We mine Bitcoin. What are you talking about? Curtail power and leverage our power load and things like that. And then, fast forward down to Miami with Disrupt last year, Dan and I had a few conversations. We had identified Dan's company as a, potential partner in this space. Got to know Dan well over a few glasses of tequila, and we hit it off pretty good. And so we continued to have conversations. And then early this year, it just was kind of a natural, hey, why don't we, look at figuring out a way to work together. So it just kind of evolved to where, I explained to Dan at the time, like, hey, man, this software of yours can do so much and really enable these miners to really leverage their load and monetize it and, help them get a good story onto the grid and good PR and all these type of things. So that's how we've gotten together. And it's been a few months now, and it's been real exciting working with Dan and the team, and just, it's been kind of fast and furious. So I really love the pace. And I really love the community that I found myself in here.
Oh, that's awesome. Natural transition from broadcast to sales in the energy and power markets. That's a no-brainer. It's kind of like me, though.
It's seamless.
I got a degree in sport management and went into selling Scotch tape and Post-it notes. Riddle me that. That's that's like, I hear you. Well, Jeremy, I'm excited to dig into all of that overlap. And I guess just since we have kind of the two, Dan, you with the software background, and then Jeremy, you with the power background, I kind of see this as like a little bit of a bifurcated episode. And so, Dan, I kind of want to start with, like, you touched on it a little bit, who Foreman is and how you guys are doing it and what you're doing. Maybe go one layer deep. Like, give me the pitch. Like, what is Foreman doing for the home miner and the institutional miner? I mean, you guys really touch kind of all the spectrum.
Yeah. So I like to think that what we bring to both sides of it is, first and foremost, probably peace of mind. When I was a hobby miner, I had, when we were hobby miners, we had probably 10 machines total, 10 what I think most people would consider to be an ASIC. We started off with S9s. We deviated a little bit, got into some non-S9s, but we corrected course and came back to Bitcoin. But we, even for us at that small scale, the problems that you're solving, if you don't solve them there, the problems scale too. So we had 10 miners, and I wanted every single one to be online because I know how long it's going to take for me to pay off that initial investment when I bought it from the manufacturer. And if I go to sleep for 8 hours or hopefully 10 hours, if I'm ever able to pull that off one night, and I wake up and I see that my machines were offline for a third of the day because, oh man, as soon as I went to sleep, this thing locked up and needed to be rebooted. That's killing me on how long it takes for me to pay things off. So we built Foreman to give us insight and also the ability to manage them. But the automation is one of the biggest pieces that we have. And that's where you can build custom rules, custom actions, all that stuff to basically say, if something happens, Ben, let me ask you a question. If something happened with your computer and it stopped working right, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Reboot it.
You're going to reboot it. Yeah. So probably 9 times out of 10, that's what any tech is doing to fix a problem. So why go to sleep and have the miner throw an error and say it couldn't connect to the pool or something? And firmware's gotten a little more advanced, even from the manufacturer over the last couple of years. But back in the day, there were times when it would just lock and you'd have to reboot the miner. So if it's just a typical computer, I should be able to just automatically do that. So that was, some of that automation is kind of key and how we add value to anybody from the hobby miner all the way up to people running at scale. So the issues you have at 10 miners, if you don't solve them or solve them well, you're going to have them again, just in a larger capacity once you hit 50,000 or 100,000 miners.
I think you're being modest about that. I think the problems scale almost larger than your operation can scale. Like, I think the problems just amplify bigger.
I agree. So some of the stuff that we see is people, you can tell who started off a small scale miner and then just tried to kind of vertically scale that operation rather than figuring out how do we build a good foundation to it. And a lot of the times we come into sites, we'll get on a sales call and the first question we'll ask is, well, how many machines do you have online today? And you'll get 10 answers from the people online, and the techs will say, well, no, that container's offline, I think. And this one's online. That one, somebody's cleaning the filters. Yeah. And it's just nobody actually knows what is hashing right now. And if you're looking at the pool's always delayed too. So you see a lot of stuff in the past 15 minutes. You might be being seeded, it's 15 minutes old. So we have a lot of situations where people don't realize what machines they actually have online and hashing at the site. There's also poor network design that causes a lot of problems with just machines staying online, us being able to reach all the machines to monitor health, even affects curtailment. So really, I actually do agree with you. The larger you get, those problems get much worse. And we've come into some sites where we come in the door for a software angle, and then we actually end up helping them solve their network problems at the same time too. So I would say nobody quite has the recipe to how to build out a 100% perfect site from day one, but people are definitely figuring it out over time. And I think that software is an important part to making sure you have the visibility and insight to see what's happening.
Absolutely. I think we're starting to get there. You're seeing a lot of the groups get there. It's definitely not out of the box. That's for sure. So what has been, I think, when we've chatted offline, I think, it seems a little bit more recent in like the last year, where you guys are starting to work directly with power companies and offering, API solutions for curtailment and just being able to plug into like utility side or rather helping the Bitcoin miners work better with the utilities. Can you maybe touch on some of that and some of the more recent iterations of the software?
Sure. So I would say probably about a year. I've been saying this for probably 8 months now, so I'll say a year and 8 months. But I always said since about a year ago. About a year and a half ago, I had no idea what curtailment was. So since then, we've built most of Foreman off of just hearing what people need, and then we kind of build in that down that avenue. And we had some conversations very early on with some of our customers where the biggest feature they're asking us to build is can I turn the mine off with Foreman, and then can I turn it back on in the future? And as you see how it's used, you realize that people are starting to get into demand response programs and trying to find unique ways to offer their load to support the grid, and in exchange, you get compensated for it. So the nice thing with demand response is that there could be a situation where the grid has a supply-demand imbalance. And just like you, Ben, you probably have auto insurance and you're paying every month and hoping your auto insurance is going to cover you if you ever get into a fender bender. The grid needs something similar, and that's what demand response is. So if there's an imbalance, they can ask somebody to go ahead and try to cover that imbalance. And you can cover that by turning off and giving that demand back to the grid so they can distribute it to people like us to keep our air conditions on. That has been, I think, revolutionary for Bitcoin miners and for the grid. It's really, Bitcoin mining is unique in that it's such a large load that is incredibly flexible. And even with the flexibility, you can go on and off, and Bitcoin keeps chugging away every 10 minutes. We're new block. So it's a little different than traditional older school data centers, where if something turns off or some manufacturing load turns off, there's a ramp up time after it. Or if you turn off a traditional data center, it might not have a UPS backup. You're going to google.com and the website's not loading. Bitcoin mining is flexible and there's no end user impact when it turns off. So it gives the grid these virtual power plants. You can view them. So if there's a demand and there's an imbalance, rather than me and you experiencing a brownout or a blackout, a Bitcoin miner just comes off and all of a sudden our lights are just staying on. So that's been very game changing. I think it helps kind of boost the resiliency of the grid that we have that's a little older, and it serves as a good solution to kind of help when those kind of weather events happen. The other nice thing, kind of the value add that we have, is demand response has always participated. It's always been around, but Bitcoin miners, if you're getting a call, you have to respond physically without software automation
very quickly.
So that means that, So depending on the program you're in, you might get a day ahead notice saying, hey, Ben, tomorrow at 2 p.m., there's going to be an event. And then you can probably make sure you're staffed. But the faster acting you are, the more aggressive the programs you participate in, the larger the quote unquote insurance check that you're getting every month is. So the faster you can go, the more you're compensated, because the more beneficial you are to a critical need. So yes, in a day ahead program, you can have somebody at the site and run around and throw breakers. But in a ancillary program, or maybe something that has to respond as quick as 10 minutes or seconds, even in some markets, you're not going to be able to throw breakers that fast.
No.
You're not going to be able to have in a container-based deployment where you've got a whole bunch of shipping containers all around the site, and you have to run around, say you have 40 containers, and you got to get the entire site off within 5 minutes. You're going to, what do you need, 15 people? 15 people to just run around and So it doesn't really scale. And if you don't have any software side to it or any automated side to it, you just can't participate in those aggressive programs that can unlock a ton of revenue. So Foreman, while we were initially miner management software, because that's what we needed as hobby miners, we've scaled a little bit too. So now we have the ability to integrate directly with those companies that are sending demand response signals. We can also monitor real-time or day-ahead market prices around pricing volatility. We also do integrations with direct local utilities, depending on the type of program that's maybe available. And all of that signaling can come into Foreman, and we will pick it up and automatically turn the mine off. So that lets you participate in all those aggressive programs, even some that are down to the seconds. And it's fully, no manual intervention required, fully automated, and it really puts the power companies and the grid in control of the load, rather than hoping that you're going to be able to run around and throw the breaker.
I mean, and that is it. It's such a powerful tool. I mean, especially since the conversations I'm having with all of the mining companies that, whether it's through the podcast or through my day job, the energy management side of the business is now starting to really crystallize as another revenue stream, because they're realizing that whether they're in ERCOT and they can, hedge and buy and sell futures and do all the crazy things you can do on the ERCOT system, or if you're just, adding dollars back to your bottom line because you're able to participate in these programs, it's a huge need. And maybe, Jeremy, this is probably a question for you too, is were you guys seeing anything like this for power companies, for large flexible loads like this before?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean,
not at all.
I always use the words like paradigm shift. And, the first trip that I took with Dan out to a mine, and it was a 10 megawatt mine that was basically like 3 square blocks, right? Like the footprint in a 10 megawatt. I've had large scale food processing plants that were 4 megawatts that you would drive past and, think it was just an entire city. And here we have 10 megawatts of load that's, in 10 shipping containers sitting out in the middle of a farm field. So, when we, identified this vertical, it was like, oh my God, these people are using enormous amounts of power. Not only that, but they can curtail all of it, right? Yeah. Whereas, a typical customer on the, manufacturing or C&I side, a lot of the discussions that I would have with them is, all right, you're a, let's say a 5 megawatt customer. How much can you curtail? Well, I can't shut down my process load, or I can't stop, slaughtering chickens or creating tires or whatever the case may be. Right. So then it became, more of an engineering play of helping them identify where they could curtail. And you had to get really creative. Is there lighting? Is there HVAC? Is there, refrigeration that you can do some pre-cooling on to, let it ramp down and we can curtail during events. So there was a lot more problem solving. Whereas with this, we're really an enablement and a control system, similar to what a BMS system does, in a standard building, right? It's automating HVAC and controls and all those type of things. What I expressed to Dan when we first met is you're really an enablement tool to participate in these programs.
Yeah.
You're really the conduit to all of these utility programs to make sure that they can participate in it. And not only do they have large loads, but they can curtail 99 to 100% of it. So it's very attractive. It's very lucrative. And it's with our software, I think it's really seamless and pretty easy to do.
Yeah. That's wild to hear that there really wasn't anything like this. Yeah. And that's, so I guess the next question I have is, so now that you guys do have this and both with Jeremy and then you, Dan, you guys are approaching, utility companies or at least the utility companies are starting to get, some exposure to the Foreman software. Are they giving you guys any cool new inputs or suggestions or, hey, maybe if we try this, like what are you guys hearing from the utilities now that you guys are, or they're starting to have exposure to you guys?
Well, what's interesting is some of these companies we end up talking to, or some of these local utilities, or really anybody on the spectrum, sometimes we'll go into this space, and for them, in their slice of the world, a 10 megawatt customer is something that really moves the needle when it goes on and off for these small local utilities. And the benefit to them is software automation, because they want to make sure that the load is always going to perform when it needs to. But they are they almost feel, some of them are like mom and pop shops, it feels like almost. And the notification mechanism you get there could be a guy named Bill will call you tomorrow at 1 p.m. and let you know that there might be a curtailment starting in 13 minutes. Some of them are text notifications, some are email notification, and you're supposed to parse out the bold time in there and not the red times. And it gets very tricky to automate. So I would say the benefit of bringing Bitcoin mining and the automation to even the smallest of utility levels, it makes them also realize that they're not really set up for the flexibility that Bitcoin mining provides and the problems that it solves. Everybody wants to leverage it, but in some places, there's really no automation to almost be able to kind of hang off of and integrate with. So we end up with some pretty crude integrations with these companies where we're setting up text message flows or email flows, and we're signing paperwork saying you're guaranteeing that this email, this payload of this email is never going to change.
Oh boy,
it gets tricky. Yeah. So it's tricky, but it's innovative even from just a processing standpoint, because now they know that they also have to build something a little more unique. The conversations too that we have, traditionally we were very focused on targeting Bitcoin miners, but we focus a lot on working with CSPs and Queasies now, establishing good integrations and good automation techniques. So any customers that come their way, we're the off-the-shelf software that they can participate in the market. We've had a lot of interest too, just from the supplier side. So if you're a supplier and you have a customer that's just maybe indexed for the entire month, doing real-time pricing, as a supplier, you don't want, effectively for the entire month, your customer is swiping your credit card. And then at the end of the month, you're going to send them a statement and really hope that they pay it. From a supplier standpoint, they've got a ton of interest also in the ability to control the load themselves, because if there's some pricing volatility and ERCOT just hit $5,000 a megawatt hour because solar and wind are on the downtrend, if that happens and pricing's volatile and it takes off, you're really going to hope that your customer turns off. But if they don't, it's nice to be able to have a big red button that you as a supplier can hit and say, it's time. We had an agreement. You weren't going to mine above $300 a megawatt hour. I can see it's $5,000 a megawatt hour. Your meter's still going. I'm going to turn you off. So there's interest in miners to automate just the site, but then there's also interest for the power companies too, just to be able to actually control the load. Even if it's not through a traditional dispatch, maybe they just want the big red button. So the conversations we have and who we're talking to, we've really been pulled heavily towards the power side.
The big, offering the big red button. It's and what phenomenal timing on that, Dan. I actually just had a conversation with ERCOT, and the biggest thing. So I asked them to kind of take a look at like, what's the future grid system look like for you guys in ERCOT? Like, if it's a perfect future, what's it look like? And the only thing that they said was to have better control so as not to have adverse events on the grid, because the concern is that the pricing signals may not be enough to incentivize turn off when they need it, or maybe people are turning off when they aren't expected to. It's just the pricing was such a variable, like a wild card for them, that they said if we had the ability to have this type of control program, that would be ideal. So they're looking at it.
Yeah, it seems like it. And you can see in ERCOT, I mean, the innovation that happens in ERCOT is really incredible, because it kind of makes and solves its own problems. I guess we can kind of say that it's pretty isolated. And that means if there's a supplier demand imbalance, it needs to be able to resolve it within itself. So the neat thing with Bitcoin mining is it's very flexible. But on the other side of that, too much flexibility also can cause you some issues. So if you think that every single, let's just say every miner in Texas right now probably is deploying S19s, and probably they're either XPs or J Pros. Effectively, they all kind of have the same break-even strike price. Mm-hmm. So if you've got 5 gigs or say 10 gigs of mining in ERCOT, and it just so happens to cross $90 a megawatt hour, that means 10 gigs is just all off. So
and that's a problem.
That's good for the Bitcoin miner, but could be bad for the grid. So it's interesting that Bitcoin mining gave a ton of flexibility. So it's great for being able to control around traditional demand response dispatches, but the pricing volatility in ERCOT and the responsiveness of Bitcoin miners also kind of generates a problem at the same time.
Absolutely.
So, and it kind good for innovation everywhere, I'd say, though, because now ERCOT's kind of forced to establish even a better grid moving forward too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's
smarter grids.
Smarter grids. Yes, Jeremy, this kind of leads nicely into a question I had for you, actually, which was, we chatted offline before we hit record, and one of the things you had mentioned or brought up was that part of your background was managing like a national level demand response program. What are your thoughts on the level of flexibility? We were kind of just touching on it, but maybe go a little bit more on it, as far as like the level of flexibility impacting demand response programs.
Yeah, I mean, basically the thing with demand response programs is you're always kind of fighting for more funding in those programs to really incentivize people to participate, right? Because previously you would tell people, hey, I can enroll you in a program where you can earn some revenue. All right, well, how much can I earn? Well, I'm going to lose money by shutting down, right? And now with, the mining space, there's dollar values that, we're trying to continue to get more funding and increase, dollars there on the, PJM or ERCOT or whatever on the grid level side. But then in addition to that, working into these regulated areas where we're seeing more of these miners kind of end up, in the Wyomings of the world and different obscure places that aren't residing on an overall grid, where they don't have a grid program, but maybe they have a utility program, or maybe they don't have a specific demand response utility program. Maybe they put the miner on a different rider or tariff price because they have that grid flexibility. But hey, we love the price break, but let's, look at, some type of revenue program that we can add in addition to that. And there's, just a couple different angles, when you talk to the grid and things like that, when the grid gets stressed, and, Dan talked about virtual power plants. So, that makes me feel like Yoda, not because I'm old, but because, I'm teaching Dan so much along the way. He's my little power Jedi, where he's using.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy. When the grid gets stressed like that, they're turning on these dirty peaker power plants, right? And, cold fire generation and things like that.
Yep.
What some people don't realize is where these peaker plants typically are in sections of city and things like that, where it's a lower socioeconomic, type of place where they can, stick these plants in there and they're not going to get that same community pushback.
Yeah.
And so really, there's, when we talk about, the pushback against, Bitcoiners in general, there really is an ESG play and a good steward of the grid play that, they're able to participate in these programs and really provide that resiliency to the grid to eliminate, firing up a peaker plant in the middle of a neighborhood where there's tons of kids running around and things like that. So, we're trying to, create more awareness, especially in these regulated utilities that, hey, you guys have attractive power pricing. So you're bringing in, these large loads. Let's help create a program together that incentivizes their resiliency and flexibility for you and, put some dollars behind it. And, we'll help you manage that program and, get people to participate at a level that makes sense for your grid or for your, individual utility there. So, on a national level, this is even a broader scope than, typical demand response, because typical demand response programs only resided in the deregulated utilities. So we're seeing more interest from the regulated side to, add this type of program that takes advantage of the flexibility of these loads.
Yeah. Well, you just went where I was going to ask you next is like, how does a deregulated market start to actually participate in an impactful way in this? I'm up in Minnesota. We have like time of day, rates and things like that up here. And I was just curious if you guys have thoughts on how maybe deregulated markets could start to play in this a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, the deregulated markets are playing it, right?
Sorry, the regulated.
It's more it's more the regulated, but it all kind of depends on where that grid is and where that, regulated. So it's regulated in that state, for example, but Minnesota resides on a portion of the MISO grid,
yep,
which as a whole has a deregulated play and has a program in there and things like that. So, MISO really came back into the demand response fold within the last year. And the reason being is there just wasn't any value for it. There wasn't any value for you to curtail, and the demand response dollars weren't there. The trade-off is that value is derived from, the capacity costs and things along those lines. So you were seeing a cheaper power price. In turn, you didn't have the value behind it. Well, when the capacity market, took a turn and went higher last year, now that, helps fund the demand response programs to make it more lucrative for people to participate in. So, with that in mind, it's kind of a trade-off there. You're funding these programs. The ratepayers typically fund these demand response programs. And so your participation in it is just like getting a rebate back for something that you already funded. Now in ERCOT, for example, after Winter Storm Uri, the legislature put more funding, not ratepayer based, but put more funding into the various programs that were down there to incentivize people to, further participate or to investigate participation in it. So, as the grids, start to see that stress, I think you're going to start to see, more movement to, hey, we need these programs in place, not just as an on-bill savings, because that's great and you're going to get access to lower power pricing, but here's a revenue mechanism that makes it attractive for people to, locate into our utility space to, not only get a lower cost of power, but to offset some of that bill spend with a revenue program.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, well, I think, it's exciting that you guys are going to be a tool to help enable that type of stuff to start to enter these grid systems. I also wanted to kind of go down the path of, are there other ways that the mining companies are utilizing Foreman to either de-risk their operation or helping them like leverage their electrical load? Are there other ways that groups or you guys are helping groups leverage your software? Maybe that's a Dan question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean, as from a load perspective, we kind of put them in control of it, really. So that could be to kind of de-risk. We do have integrations with real-time markets, day-ahead markets. So that means that we can curtail around some just kind of commodity price. So if a customer knows that they've got a certain break-even point, if the pricing goes above that, then we can kind of automate the shutdown. Now, what's interesting about that is the way that actually rolls into the other side of the business. So you might just not be real-time electricity rates. Maybe you took a position in the market and you're on a block of power at some fixed rate for, say, if you're lucky, you got a super long block like some of the pubcos out there for a cheap COVID price. But if you or maybe you're in a spot where you're just going to take a short-term position for a couple of days because you think that there could be some event where pricing is going to go high and you want the opportunity to leverage that. So we can automate the mining around mining economics, but how that affects the other side is if you do have a block and you're paying a fixed rate and there's a opportunity in the real-time market where when you have that block, maybe you're locked in at, say, $50 a megawatt hour on a block. If the real-time market shoots up to, say, 5,000 or 6,000, like happening almost every single day in ERCOT, especially through this hot mid-August.
Like 90 plus day stretch of 100-degree weather. Yeah.
That's exactly it. I mean, 4 CPs getting called every day, it seems like. So if you had the opportunity to lock up a block of power at a fixed rate during those days and pricing takes off, where traditionally we'd be curtailing you around real-time prices to protect your position, now you can instead be liquidating that in the real-time market. So if pricing crosses above your block price, say rather than $55 a megawatt hour, maybe pricing hits $100 a megawatt hour. If you curtail, you have the opportunity to sell that in the real-time market and make the difference. So that's another way that Foreman kind of helps with some of the risk there. So now customers can really take a position in the market and commit to purchasing power for a certain amount of time. And if they're using Foreman for the automation, we can be auto liquidating that block of power as soon as there's an opportunity. So it becomes a cost savings on one side if you just have index exposure, but it's also a very substantial revenue driver if they took the right position right before one of these ERCOT blowouts happens. And I'm talking more about ERCOT, but this we do this everywhere, not just ERCOT. Just ERCOT's kind of the cool one to talk about because it's so volatile and everybody likes a good ERCOT story.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
No, Ben, I was just going to piggyback on that and just add one other element to it. I mean, the biggest kind of issue we're seeing with the miners is they're asking for so much collateral, right, to, get these power positions. So oftentimes they're stuck being on an index because, a retail electric provider wants them to put up millions of dollars in collateral to take a short-term block position that might only be 3 or 4 months. So they really can't, play in the energy market and, do any cost, dollar cost averaging and, add blocks and layer things in and really, formulate a good power purchasing strategy, right? So, our hope and what we're, engaging with suppliers and really talking about is, as the market starts to mature, as they feel more comfortable with the entities that are mining, they can start to secure financials, they can start to secure payment history and things like that.
Yeah.
By leveraging all those things with the addition of kind of having that big red button that we talked about, let's alleviate some of that collateral that you're asking for from the miners, right? Let's take that down to, allow them to, free up some cash flow and also, potentially take some more, term length positions, with a fixed quantity so that they can, realize some revenue from liquidating those blocks or just get some, cost certainty in that realm too. So that's one other area.
Maybe Jeremy, you could hit on that TIPA conference that we went to. I'll let you.
Just going to ask. I'll let
you
about
talk
that.
about it. Yeah, but he's kind of like talking about it ish, but it's interesting. Maybe you can share how that went for us, Jeremy. And it's funny that a lot of them are asking for Bitcoin mining without saying they want Bitcoin mining.
Yep.
Maybe you can.
Yeah,
elaborate.
I mean, so TIPA is the Energy Professionals Association, and that pretty much consists of retail electric providers and brokers. And then there's kind of like the partner side, right? So, CSPs are involved there. You may see some controls systems there, solar companies, batteries, things along those lines. So, coming from that space for such a long period of time, I thought it would be good because, we're targeting a lot of those companies to partner up with and to, really, do work with and collaborate with along, not only the supply side, but also on the Queasy and CSP side. And so, there's just so much talk when they're, giving these discussions. I think, Dan's sitting next to me and he's just nudging me every 2 seconds and he's blown away about, what they're talking about is necessary for the grid and, what they're trying to identify as, loads that they want to, target, whether it be from the commodity side or from, the CSP side. And then, during those social hours, we really tried to make a point to target, those retail electric providers and say, hey, we really want to work with you, not only, to show what we can do for your customers, but also to, take away some of that fear that you have of, working with a Bitcoin miner, because they all know like, oh my God, these are big loads. They could be big dollars for us, but oh my God, these are big loads. They could be a real pain in the butt for us.
That could really disrupt some things. Yeah,
exactly. And, when Dan talks about, your credit card or your checkbook, they're trying to protect that because they get paid in arrears. So, we're trying to help them out to give them, really a sense of security there with their customers. But just to, really, kind of enlighten them as to, what these companies are really able to do, both on a load level and on a curtailment level, by utilizing our software ideally. But, just really giving them some insight on how these miners operate and really what the full potential is there. They just see a big block of power and a big cost on the bottom line, but there's so much more to that.
Yeah, they're comparing it to a traditional industry, it seems like, where they're expecting this miner to kind of just be on and mining 24/7, never coming off, or maybe there's a minimum amount of power they have to consume, and that could be substantially high depending on the type of manufacturing facility it might be. But we're sitting in the audience, and I mean, it's definitely connecting more with Jeremy. I'm relying on him to translate for me. But it's funny, we're sitting there and some of the suppliers are up on stage answering questions, and their answers are around flexibility of the loads that they're supplying and how more flexibility helps them out. And it's like they're just not quite putting two and two together. It's like we're just somehow at an impasse where they view Bitcoin mining with this kind of negative connotation, but they don't also they aren't realizing that it's there's a flexibility that goes with it.
Yeah.
And yes, there could be some risk for you, but you can have the big red button and you can also have the flexibility that you want.
Do you happen to have, either of you or both of you, do you guys happen to have like a hypothesis about why that Bitcoin mining still hasn't really hit their radar? Is it just such a new industry, or maybe it's still just the risky crypto, shady supercoder bros? Like, do you guys have a hypothesis why it might not be clicking for them yet?
I think you said it. They don't understand Bitcoin. So in turn, they don't understand when really at the end of the day, it's just a power load, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. They don't understand, the tire manufacturing process either, I don't think. But they just, it's such a, grandfathered industry, and it's just, accepted that they're using a large, quantity of power, and, they're an established industry and all these type of things. They feel that they have to the first thing they tell us, I just don't understand Bitcoin. I still don't get it. I've tried to look into it and this and that. Well, you're looking at it, on such a macro level, whereas on the micro level, it's just a large flexible power load. And that's what we're asking you to look at it as. We don't want you to go out and, be able to give us the specifics of hash rate and, blockchain and all those type of things, and where it's, where it can be utilized in society. We just, are trying to expose you to the fact that, these customers can be lucrative and flexible for you at the same time. And, we can, help give you access to it. So I think that's a lot of it is just they don't understand the industry as opposed to just looking at it as, hey, here's another potential customer that's on the grid right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can maybe add a little bit too. So I think the news can sometimes generally be, they're very quick to run the bad things about Bitcoin, but always hesitant to run the good things about Bitcoin.
Yep.
So if you're just kind of a traditional supplier and like Jeremy's example, the mom and pop tire shops there and whatever price of tires aren't fluctuating. I don't even know what a tire costs anymore, but I'm sure it's not drifting to $30,000 tomorrow.
No.
So it's very easy to understand those traditional businesses, but when you think about Bitcoin and then you start to think about the news and, oh my God, Bitcoin used to be 60,000, Bitcoin miners scared, pricing now halving next year,
bankruptcies
and pricing
left
at
and right.
SBF and all this, and everybody's just thinking, man, I don't. That grid story was great, but look at all this stuff burning over here, and so I think that it's quick to dismiss the flexibility and everything that goes with it. And I think people get caught up too much in the noise from the bad actors of the space, and they don't focus on the fact that some of the stocks are doing the best in the market right now are Bitcoin miners, and people are scaling like crazy, and this is really kind of revolutionizing the currency as we know it.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies are doing this very successfully and hyper scaling during these bear markets. You can't focus on the few bad apples that maybe didn't run their businesses quite correctly, or maybe didn't have the flexibility that they said they promised they would. And some people maybe got caught with a pretty big check during those winter storms in Texas. I think that when you take a step back and look at where we are today versus where we were before, miners are here, miners are doing this well, and people are taking positions in the market and they're benefiting tremendously off of it. So it's time for other people to realize that things are a little more mature than they seem when you look at some of this SBF and everything else. Those are totally just unrelated.
Yeah. It's I don't know what it is about, the bad news that seems to surface so quickly and so easily. Fortunately,
FOMO.
I've had some people who have been very open-minded. I'm getting lunch with the Minnesota, Public Utilities Commission. There are groups that are starting to say, you know what, I'll listen. Come explain it to me a little bit, and which is promising. And I think the other thing with us in the Bitcoin mining space, Jeremy, I think you mentioned it. We're used to moving at light speed, just absolute warp speed, and power companies like, yeah, maybe in 18 months. We're like, how about 18 days, right? I mean, I think it's just a timing thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I saw it happen just in the deregulated market space, right? Everyone was afraid that, we get our power from the utility. And if you invite all these other people in, some old lady, some grandma is going to get taken advantage of, and she's going to be paying an exorbitant amount of power, and these bad actors are going to come in. And that's everything that they, just all the arrows are directed at that. When now the research and data is there that, the deregulated markets here in Illinois, because we're kind of, on an island directly around us, the cost of power here compared to Indiana or, different states just, connected to us, even Iowa to the west is substantially lower as a result of deregulation. So, just the industry as a whole just always gets so frantic about these bad actors and things like that are out there. And, I think as, more time gets under our belt in the industry, it's just, it's going to be a different conversation 2 to 3 years from now.
Yeah. Maybe just to keep a quick tab on the time. You guys have been super graceful with your time on a Monday. It's, I appreciate that a lot. So maybe just to keep a tab on the time, I wanted to maybe kind of round the conversation out by asking, can you guys give us a teaser as to what cool things Foreman's working on? I don't know if you're able to share any of the cool stuff that we can maybe expect to start seeing in the future from you guys.
I would say some of the cool stuff we're focusing on now is definitely based on probably more of a data angle, I would say. I think that we can get pretty smart about machine failures and detecting those in advance. So I think that the value add out of management software, it's definitely going to get more towards the how's our business look in 6 months or a year versus show me all the problems that happen right now.
Yep.
So getting a little more proactive instead of reactive, which was I think one of the boxes that management software has traditionally been in. I think I would be doing an injustice to myself if I didn't say AI. I think I have to drop this in there somewhere, right, to get a high valuation next time. AI. I think that there's some cool modeling we're looking at doing to help find unique ways for our customers to stay mining through what might look like some market volatility that maybe doesn't actually pan out. So getting a little better about how we determine there's a time to turn off or on some market pricing or not. I think we're focusing pretty heavily on the energy side of things, and now that our customers are getting into some of these very aggressive demand response programs, that's been a lot of engineering on our side too to make sure we can help them participate in it. So I think in North America, probably most of our customers are maybe into some 10-minute ancillary program or 30-minute ancillary program. We are actually going through testing this week with some customers who are actually in Norway, and there's a frequency response market over there called FCR, and it's down to seconds. We're talking about seconds of curtailment here. So over here, we're solving problems 5 minutes, but over there, for anything before September 1st, the timing constraint was you had to have 50% of the load down within 5 seconds. Full load down within 30 seconds. And after September 1st, it's movement within 2.5 seconds, full load down within 7 seconds. So
holy shit.
It's incredible. Traditionally, they would be doing this with breakers or something like that. But now Bitcoin miners we can turn off small sections of the mine. So the small sections of the mine can get enrolled into the market separately. There's just really neat things this lets you position yourself in these markets, but there's a ton of revenue being made. And now we're talking about seconds of response time. So that was some fun engineering there. We're going through testing right now with them over there this week. So feeling pretty good about it, but trying to bring the fast acting demand response stuff to other parts of the world that need it also.
It's fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate the teaser on you guys are working on some cool stuff. So I appreciate sharing some of the other things that we can start to keep an eye out and look for. I want to make sure I give you guys some room at the end here for a handoff. I want the audience to be able to get in touch with you in whatever capacity you think is the most appropriate. I've even had people give out their phone numbers. I don't know if I recommend that, but
I don't think I'm going to do that.
Yeah, but please give a handoff so the audience can find you guys and learn more and get plugged into your guys' software.
Sure. So I'm Dan again, co-founder and CEO of Foreman. You can reach me. I'm the guy that runs our Twitter account at the moment. So at Foreman Mining on Twitter. If you shoot us a DM, that'll probably be me that's reading it. I like to stay up on it. Also, you can reach me through email at dan@obm. That's OBM for one bar mining.mn. And Ben, we are not a Minnesota company. What's funny is when we started this thing, we tried to get .io because that's the real sexy thing for tech companies, but .io was taken. So we said, well, let's start something new. It's 2016, 2017, MN for mining. This is going to take off. It didn't take off. We're the only company in the space that uses .mn. And now every time we get on a call for anything, they'll say, MN, are you guys in Minnesota? Or MN, are you guys Mongolian? So it did not work. But I just wanted to let you know we're not in Minnesota. But yeah, I'm super reachable via email. Anything anybody needs, feel free to reach out to me directly. dan@obm.mn. About Foreman, it's free actually for less than 25 miners. So if anybody just wants to sign up and play with it, you get everything, all the bells and whistles, totally free for less than 25.
And Jeremy, before you give a handoff there, I'm going to piggyback on that last part. Dan, I personally use your guys' software for, I started down in the basement, ran, 4 of them initially, then got up to 8 of them before I completely maxed out. And my wife said that she was going to kick me out of the house if I didn't get them out of the house. So, I mean, guys, your software is unbelievably incredible. It's so easy. I'm not a software guy, and I'm able to turn my laptop on and manage miners in seconds, find the IPs. I can't say enough good things, guys.
Thank you.
That's please take that up, try it, play with it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
So Jeremy also would love to, leave room to give you a handoff as well.
Sure. Thanks. I'm just J Ellis, JELLIS at obm.mn as well. So, my title is Director of Power Strategy. So that's, everything power related, whether it be the commodity, whether it be, evaluating where to, look at a potential site and what type of programs are available there on the curtailment side. But I tell customers too, with my background, we're not your power consultant, but, I can be an extra set of eyes there because I've helped, with the procurement strategy. I've helped, do contracts around, curtailment. So, we really want to make sure that, you're really utilizing every, KW that you have available and really getting the maximum dollar value for it. So, working with us, you got Dan and the development team, myself and, the team that we have kind of on the power side. It's really there to make sure you're utilizing every aspect of the software, you're maximizing every potential dollar, and just, really crafting a strategy that works, in whatever market that you're at to really get you set up for success. So
awesome, guys. This has been absolutely fantastic. It's been a blast. Appreciate the time. Well, I look forward to running into you guys either at the next event or, maybe I'll get out to your guys' headquarters soon here too, and we'll do something fun in person.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take care, guys. All right. Bye.
Thanks, Ben.